There are 400 different types of anemia. Now, the main cause of anemia, or the main definition of anemia, is having low levels of red blood cells in our circulatory system. Now, the two main reasons that we can suffer from anemia is because we are not producing enough red blood cells, or these red blood cells are getting destroyed prematurely. So those are the two main causes of anemia. And again, anemia is not having enough red blood cells in our body. Now, the reasons that we may suffer from anemia is because of nutritional deficiencies and because of side effects of medications. Now, again, I mentioned there are 400 different types of anemia, so obviously these two reasons are not going to cover all 400. So the symptoms of anemia include euthyries, you have shortness of breath, you have heart palpitations, poor concentration, weakness, and pale skin. So those are just a few of the symptoms of anemia. And anemia is often associated with an iron deficiency. Now, 2/3 of all the iron in our body is contained in our blood. So if you're not making healthy red blood cells, you are going to have an iron deficiency because 2/3 of all the iron in our body is in our red blood cells. So 20% of women actually suffer from an iron deficiency, and 80% of people who work out or exercise a lot also suffer from an iron deficiency. All of this stuff is straight out of my textbooks, so I was really surprised to read that up to 80% of people who exercise have an iron deficiency. Because of that, I actually ordered an iron supplement that I'll leave in the description box along with a bunch of other stuff. Okay, so let's get into the board here. So I'm going to focus on basically the cycle of red blood cells and how they are made and what they are. So red blood cells are made in the bone marrow. But before I go any further, all the vitamins are in orange, and the toxins are in turquoise with a purple frame around them. Okay, anyways, red blood cells, RBC, are made in bone marrow. Now, they completely mature. When they enter the bloodstream, they are completely mature red blood cells, and they have lost their DNA and their mitochondria. That's what gives them their unique shape, this concave shape. And they are essentially a bag of these proteins called hemoglobin. Now, it's these hemoglobin proteins that have our iron atom in them. And it's this heme group that specifically has the iron atom in the protein. Now, it's the iron that really does the work for these red blood cells because it's the iron that attaches to the oxygen and carbon dioxide. Now, again, red blood cells and hemoglobin's purpose is to carry oxygen through the body and also help us get rid of carbon dioxide. So anemia is essentially, if you are suffering from anemia, you are essentially suffering from a form of suffocation. You are not getting enough oxygen to your tissues. You are suffocating your tissues if you are suffering from anemia or low levels of red blood cells. So again, it's the iron atom that really does the work for us. So it's really important that we're getting enough iron. Now, these toxins here, these gases, carbon monoxide, nitric oxide, cyanide, and this hydrogenated sulfur molecule all bind to iron tighter than oxygen and carbon dioxide. So these are toxins. These will not let your hemoglobin do its work for you because these are out binding the oxygen and carbon dioxide. These are toxins. Also, ATP. This is our main energy molecule in our body. If ATP does not have any magnesium associated to it, it's also going to bind stronger than oxygen and carbon dioxide to this iron atom. So you really need magnesium in these red blood cells to keep the ATP from overbinding to oxygen, to the iron over oxygen and carbon dioxide. And finally, we have this chloride atom. Chloride is critical for having the iron and oxygen bind correctly, or their affinities to be proper. So we need chloride. So we need chloride and magnesium. So far in this. And down here, just a footnote really, we have IHP, which is inositol hexaphosphate, or vitamin B8, which is a pseudovitamin. This actually outbinds to iron over oxygen and carbon dioxide. It was just in my textbook, so I throw it up here. Another main issue is you're eating your iron, you're getting enough iron from your diet, but you're having trouble absorbing the iron. So vitamin C can actually help raise our absorption of iron up to 50%. Vitamin A, chloride, also in copper, also help with the absorption of iron. Again, chloride is critical for making hydrochloric acid in the stomach, which helps us absorb our minerals. Proteins in sugar also raise iron's absorption. Calcium and zinc lower the absorption. These all lower the absorption, these raise the absorption. So we have calcium and zinc, coffee, tea, oxalates and phytates. These all lower our ability to absorb iron. Oxalates are in these green vegetables, and same with the phytates. These are also in our vegetables, some of our vegetables anyway. Okay, so we've covered the iron and aspects of the heme group. Now let's go up here to these vitamins up here. So we have B6, B9, B12, and cobalt, vitamin E, and selenium. So all these vitamins and minerals in one way or another contribute to the vitality of red blood cells. It's selenium that makes glutathione, which helps reduce oxidative stress. Vitamin E helps with cell wall stability. And B6 helps for proper formation, and B9 and B12, as well as cobalt, because cobalt is the cofactor in the vitamin B12. These two vitamins are also critical for proper red blood cell development. Okay, so once the red blood cell is mature, and again, it leaves the bone marrow, it is a bag of hemoglobin, essentially a bag of hemoglobin. So it travels to the lungs and skin, where it picks up our oxygen for us. And then it carries the oxygen to our capillary bed. And the capillary bed here are these just really small blood vessels in our body. And in these capillary beds, the carbon dioxide concentration is really high. And it's this high concentration of carbon dioxide that actually helps kick our oxygen molecule off the heme group in red blood cells, and it actually replaces the oxygen. So that's the transfer. When we release the oxygen and we pick up the carbon dioxide, that happens in the capillary bed. And then the oxygen can go into the tissues and, do its work for us in the tissues. So anyways, at this point in the capillary bed, we pick up the carbon dioxide, dump the oxygen, and the red blood cells then move this carbon dioxide to the lungs and the skin for export. Okay, so red blood cells have about 100, healthy red blood cells last about 120 days in the body. So when they start to break down, they are processed by the spleen and the liver. So the spleen breaks down a lot of the components of the red blood cell. However, it is the liver that breaks down these heme groups. Now, it's these heme groups that are insoluble in blood, so they are carried through the blood with albumin, which is a protein made in the liver. So these heme groups with albumin are transported to the liver, where they are broken down to bilirubin. Now, bilirubin is basically soluble in blood, it's aqueous, and it's at that point, we're able to safely excrete these heme groups as bilirubin. Now, I want to bring up one point here is that these heme groups in bilirubin are made of 4 pyrrole rings. Now, these 4 pyrrole rings are extremely toxic. So it's important that we break our hemoglobin down, our heme groups down correctly. So if you have a liver dysfunction, you may not be breaking your heme groups down properly, and these can actually be toxic to the body. In fact, high pyrrole levels are found in some forms of schizophrenia. Okay, so finally, the bilirubin is actually exported through our body through urine and feces, and it's actually what gives our feces the brown color and our urine the gold color that we sometimes see. One other thing, okay, so to complete the loop here, pardon me. So to complete the loop, when our oxygen levels drop too much in the blood, it sends a signal to the kidneys. So when our oxygen levels drop, it sends a signal to the kidneys to release this glycoprotein, this hormone or glycoprotein called erythropoietin. Now these kidneys release erythropoietin, again a glycoprotein, and it goes back to the bone marrow and it tells the bone marrow to make more red blood cells. So if you are suffering from anemia, you could be putting a lot of stress on your kidneys because it keeps sending a signal to tell your bone marrow to make more red blood cells. If you have any liver damage, you may not be excreting your iron properly and safely as well. Okay, so one more aspect of just what does oxygen do for us. Now again, I mentioned anemia is actually a form of suffocation, and let's see what it actually does for us. 20% of the oxygen that we bring into our body is used by the brain. The brain is 3 to 5 pounds, and it uses 20% of the oxygen that we bring into our body. 30% goes to our skeletal muscle at rest. The mitochondria is an organelle in cells, and it is one of the only aerobic compartments in the cell that requires oxygen, and it's the mitochondria that makes our energy. So that's very critical. We use oxygen to make cholesterol, vitamin D, and neurotransmitters. There's a crash course in anemia and the cycle of red blood cells. Thanks for watching.